What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Player One versus the World, and I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming on my show the founding member of Son Lux, and he's also the composer of the upcoming Tell Me Why, and his name is Ryan Lott. Ryan, how are you doing, man?
Oh, really good. Thank you so much. I'm surviving happily.
So it's a very weird place in the world at the minute, so I'm glad that you've actually been able to come on my show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Fantastic. So, let's just start with, for me, the logical starting point is how did you end up pursuing a career path into music and specifically getting into composing music as well?
Yeah, music was like a family rule for my family, for the kids. You know, like there's three of us, and I was the youngest. And I don't come from a musical family at all, but it was sort of just a family rule that kids had to play piano. Take piano lessons, you know. And I absolutely hated it for years. It was the worst form of punishment. And something bizarre happened, which is that I realized that I could make my own music and not just play what was on the page. And for some reason, that made all the difference in the world, in my brain and in my heart. And I fell in love with making music. And from then on out, saw piano lessons as a sort of necessary evil. But music came alive to me the moment that I could make it my own.
That's really interesting to hear that was the career path. And in that adventure into music, that pursuit of it, what kind of influences were there, musician wise? Was there someone that really heavily inspired that music direction that you take now?
Well, it's been a long path, because I started when I was 6 years old. So that was 35 years ago. So it's been so I can't say if I go down that path, I'd spend all day. But I will say that early on, I just started playing in bands, you know. We had little kid garage bands and stuff, you know. And at the same time, I was taking these classical piano lessons. And pretty early on, I started to study music at a university. Mm-hmm. I started when I was 11. And there was always this weird dichotomy in my musical education, where I was playing in clubs with a band, but then very seriously studying, fancy pants classical music stuff, you know. So I was always caught in between two worlds, and I actually think that if there's something that maybe is a trademark of my DNA, is that I'm fascinated with reconciling those opposites as well as others. That was a formative, lifelong experience of playing pop music on one side of my brain and classical music on the other side of my brain.
Interesting way to get into music. I'll no doubt about that. So, you know, your career as a composer, you've composed music for films, you composed music for theatre, and then we jump into gaming with Tell Me Why. How did that come about, landing the gig as the composer for Tell Me Why?
Yeah, the Dontnod folks were basically, they were big Son Lux fans, and when they were envisioning the color and the texture of this game, I think they just said, well, why don't we reach out to someone that we all love, whose music we appreciate already. Maybe not someone in the industry per se, but someone whose music we really like. And I remember the first creative call I had with them, it was kind of just like the interview. I think 2 out of 3 of the guys had been to Son Lux shows within a year in France. And so I definitely had, that helped my definitely helped me think, helped my ego a bit. It was like, well, I think I've got this job. But this was my first game. I had done some other things, just like some really small scale stuff, but this was my first serious game. And while I had done film before, I'd really never done gameplay stuff, but it really scratched an itch for me, because I'm always thinking of music in puzzles and assembling puzzles for myself and to solve in one way or the other. And that's part of my composition process. It's part of the way my brain works. And so it felt like a really natural fit, to be honest.
Okay. So, Dontnod, French studio, they've worked on plenty of games. And was there any kind of like general curiosity, or did you personally start researching the studio just to have a look at what they've produced in the past, like game-wise, and even music direction as well on those games? Was there anything that you did in that long lines?
Yes and no. They gave me some really good references to check out, some games to play myself, and scores that they liked, but they were careful to articulate that they did not want just to retread where they'd been in the past, and that they were absolutely they wanted Son Lux. They wanted Ryan of Son Lux, and so their reference. So yes, I did my homework. I checked out their previous games, but with the caveat that that I'm really embarking on my own path, and that they were going to trust me. And that was the thing for me that really sold me on the game, is they clearly had a lot of respect for what I had done in the past, and they had an intuitive respect for me, as an artist. And I knew that I'd be able to really express myself in the game, and that wasn't just going to be, doing someone else's bidding.
Okay. And you touched on it a minute ago about, like, this is your first gaming project. And obviously taking those experiences of composing music for theatre, for film, how similar was it composing music for a game, or did you just find it completely different? Like the approach had to be different, or was it just let's do what I've been doing before?
I learned a lot. I mean, it was a healthy mix of both. I felt very comfortable. I mean, I've done so much scoring. I've done a lot of. I actually spent several years. My full-time job was writing music for ads, which was an incredible. It was like every day it was just a series of etudes, essentially compositional etudes. I would write 2 to 6 pieces of music, write, record, mix, master, lay back to picture every single day for years. And that helped me get really fast with my tools, but also, just learn about scoring. Of course, that was extremely short form stuff, but technologically speaking, it's quite identical to longer form stuff, to film, and to certainly the cinematic aspects of games. And there's a lot of cinematic stuff in Tell Me Why. It was the gameplay sequences that were the new territory for me. But I love to solve a musical puzzle in many different ways. And essentially that's what it is to make, at least in my experience this time, to compose music for the gameplay sequences, where the player, one of the coolest things about gaming, right, is you as a player are sort of in control of not only your physical space, but your sound environment. If it's a good score. Sorry, I just had an incoming call.
Okay, that's fine.
Let me tell this person to go away. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, so I mean, it's so exciting as a gameplay sequences are exciting because you're not just controlling your physical space, but you're controlling your sound environment if the score is good. And if the score is really designed to follow the moods of your choices. Yeah, so I'm so that was the new territory, and I'm I feel like I feel like I had a knack for it, but I was quite afraid, to be honest, in my ignorance going into it. But the Dontnod team was super patient. They were really, I just kind of came up with my own system, and they were super great about just being like, yeah, that works great. Let's do that. Whatever you want. And yeah, it was awesome.
So you said that you were moving into new territory with this, and when they told you more about the character, the stories, the setting of the game, what was your initial reaction just hearing this universe story that they'd created?
Well, my very first reaction in the interview was that they should hire someone else. They should hire a trans person. Mm-hmm. If they can find a composer who isn't cis male, that would probably be. Personally, I'd rather that the gig go, given the nature of the story. I'd rather the gig go elsewhere. And they had done their research. I was happy to hear, and so, you know, it was ultimately there was broad consideration given to a number of folks, including some trans composers, and ultimately they preferred to work with me on this. So that was my first impression. I was like, maybe I shouldn't do this. You know, I've got tons of opportunities. I'm white, I'm straight male, but I do respect them for having gone through the process and opening and trying to be intentional about who they looked to score it. But when so then it was about getting inside these characters, and it was because it's an episodic game. It's quite a complex and broad plot, and it's there's a lot of there's a lot of internal. I don't want to give anything away. There's so much you learn about the characters really early on, but then there's a lot of really significant stuff that you don't learn until late in the game. And so it's important to balance, to kind of, for me, it was really important to understand where we were headed, ultimately, before really knowing how to start and how to appropriately develop the score for 1 and then 2 and then 3.
Okay. So, you know, they've told you the story, they've told you the characters, they've told you the setting. So what were the initial ideas that started floating through your head for music? Like, what were the first things that were like, I want this to be the direction of it? Like, take us back to that moment.
Yeah. It needed to balance the familiar and the unfamiliar sonically for me. That could describe the psychological state of our main characters, which is that they are returning to a very familiar place with a ton of unanswered questions. And so I really wanted the score to strike a balance between things that are familiar to your ear and that feel kind of like home and that feel welcoming, but balanced with plenty of sounds and textures that you can't place. They should feel kind of strange and alien, and maybe a bit unsettling. So I started just to develop sketches, and one of the things that I do is I design my own instruments, mostly in the virtual realm. And so the first stage for me was exactly that, was beginning to not only just not even working with melody and harmony and rhythm, but actually from sound itself, cultivating the color of the sounds that I wanted, the texture and the grain of in the way that, you know, a game has its own atmosphere visually. I was developing that atmosphere first, and then I started to work on some themes, And to be honest, the two themes, the sort of primary and secondary themes that I developed first, like right away, where they stuck. They just worked, and they felt right to everybody. So normally in a project of this scope, there's a good deal of theme exploration, of coming up with a bunch of different options for themes, but these two just felt like hand in glove. They go hand in glove together, but they felt like hand in glove for the game as well. So I sort of lucked out. You never really know in scoring. You sort of, it's a lot of it is luck.
That's really interesting. And when we don't know much about the soundtrack yet, I think we'll obviously learn more when the game comes out. But speaking on the soundtrack, when you were developing it, what were the main instruments that like you focused on utilizing the most? Was there anything that you were like kind of go to? I want to use this the most out of like, and put an emphasis on this on the soundtrack.
Well, of the sounds that are familiar, the piano is the piano is certainly a primary color. Mm-hmm. And then the instruments that I designed, it's a lot of instruments based on stringed instruments, of performances, traditional and non-traditional ways of performing, violin, viola, and cello. Mm-hmm. Not really bass, just a touch of bass in the score. And other sounds that are like have synthetic sources, just like that are truly like synthesized sounds. But with sort of acoustic reverb. And another key sound is the sound of crotales, which are like super, they're very, very tiny metal percussion instruments, but I've manipulated them so that they sound like kind of like glass, like glistening, like a very high-pitched glistening sort of rustling glass sound. And then also the marxophone, which is a unique instrument, which is performed like a keyboard, like a very small keyboard where a hammer falls onto a string but is allowed to bounce. So it's like like this. So yeah, the marxophone. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing insight to how that's the music direction that you took with it. And recently we had Dontnod and Xbox Game Studio released part of the soundtrack, and it was specifically the part where Tyler and Alyson's home, that kind of music for it is very beautiful, by the way, just to let you know. I just wanted to know how long it takes you to record.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to know how long it takes you to record a scene like that, especially when it's so emotionally hard-hitting.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's very variable. From time to time, you get lucky and it comes together really fast. Usually, if you spend some time in silence with the scene and just kind of internalize the pace and the emotion without music, you can begin to imagine the kind of emotional shifts that are required. And you can almost improvise along with the scene once it's kind of in your brain and in your body's. You can sort of absorb its timings. You can start to feel them, so you can actually improvise. Sometimes you can actually improvise, and that creates the skeleton of the scene. The scene in question you're talking about, that's from very early in the game, and the scoring at first was much slower because I was still developing my palette, still designing instruments, and kind of just getting a hang of it. So that was generally how I approached this game, which is that I spent a lot of time in episode 1 making sure that all of my vocabulary, musically speaking, that I was laying a really good foundation, so that as I was developing the score and as the score changes, because the score definitely does change, that it started at an appropriate place, knowing where I was likely going to have to go.
Interesting. And obviously sticking on the music and the soundtrack, we had a recent trailer come out, and we had Till I See You Again as the track featured on the trailer for it. I imagine we'll see more licensed tracks in the soundtrack. All right?
Yep.
Right.
Yep, a bit.
And okay, and so like obviously, because I know from experience with Dontnod games like Life is Strange, they do use a lot of licensed tracks. Just walk me through the process of like just selecting tracks. Like, what do you look for when you select certain tracks for the soundtrack?
Yeah, so that's generally a role that is reserved for the that isn't. I definitely am given. I'm allowed a strong opinion, but it's not the role of the composer to kind of solve those particular problems. In film, it would be like a music supervisor. And in this case, with Dontnod, it was just the general creative team vetting various options. But like I said, it was always like, you know, they every step of the way, Dontnod was really awesome about like, what does Ryan think? You know, whether it was a piece of licensed music or even the pace of a cinematic that was still in development, or you know, they truly made me feel like, and they made me a part of the creative team with decision making abilities. You know, so yeah, it was cool.
Oh, that's amazing. And when you said then that they asked you for what you thought, did you ever think like maybe you should put a bit of Son Lux music on the soundtrack, or was that a no-go?
Well, actually, and this is a little a bit of info that I didn't think about when you first asked about how I got involved in the project, but when the team was putting together this sort of mood board, which is like in gaming and film and in ads, really anything, you creative team puts it together a mood board, which is kind of like existing materials that feel like the direction that you want to take your product or your project. And so they picked a Son Lux song as like, this is like the sound of the feeling that we're looking for, you know? So there's not a Son Lux song in the game. However, it's, you know, it's definitely in the DNA because I scored the whole thing. But even from the start, you know, it was like, this is the direction we want to head, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So sticking on that collaboration with Dontnod, and we've obviously touched on it just earlier on, but when you were working on the music, did you closely collaborate with the game's director, or was it more that they wanted you to find the direction for the music and then they kind of like chimed in?
Yeah, it was a close conversation all the way. With each scene, we have a group discussion about the goals of the scene. Things that are like mostly conceptual, like, this is what we want the player to feel, this is what the character is going through, reminder, this is what just happened in the character's experience, and this is what's happening next with the character. So it's like, you know, it's a group discussion about the full picture, and then it's sort of up to me to determine where the score intersects with those goals and with the character development. And they really defer to me entirely on that aspect. And then of course, if there's feedback, it's a very honest engagement. So anything that didn't work, they felt completely free to push back. And anytime that I disagreed with their pushback, they trusted me as an artist, and it was all really amicable, and I think everybody just had a really rewarding experience from it.
Oh, amazing!
I don't think there was a single moment where their pushback, though, wasn't something. While I didn't always agree, I was always able to find just another way of doing it where I was just as happy. So, and that's one of the challenges of scoring, is you really have to get your ego out of the way. You're ideally not you're not serving the role of a servant. You are serving the project. You're not serving the egos of the people involved. So you do need a bit of humility. And I tend to think of any sort of pushback, any sort of like, this doesn't feel quite right, as an opportunity to find another solution. And that's one of the great things about music, is there's so many different ways to solve the problem,
That's cool. And so this is your project, you specifically working as the composer. But I'm just curious to know that if you shared any of this music with Son Lux members, like when you were developing it, just to see what their feedback was, or if they give you any kind of like advice, or is it just a no-go, this is my project?
To be honest, the guys have not heard, I don't think, a single note. But it's for good reason, and that's that we are extremely busy, and have been extremely busy, making a huge amount of new material as Son Lux. And in addition to that, Rafiq was making a solo record, and Ian was making a solo record, and so we're all extremely busy pumping out lots of music. It's a good life.
In the band's music, you said that there was kind of like maybe a little bit of shades of Son Lux in the soundtrack or the composition you were doing. Did you kind of want to not do that at any point, or was that intentional part of the plan to put your music influence into that game?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. For me, it wasn't so much about what I wanted to accomplish. It was more about what the game wants, what the project needs, and how can I honestly, being completely myself, create what the game wants. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you mean. I get
but of course, because Son Lux has been my baby for 12 years now or something crazy. Even more than that, if you think about the time it took to make the first record. Son Lux is in my DNA, and it is very much who I am. It is now a band. The project is now a trio, but it's what you hear in Son Lux is a huge part of me and of my being. And so there's naturally a lot of overlap in particularly the highly atmospheric and sort of melancholic emotional aspects of the Son Lux music. I think fans of Son Lux will definitely hear it. And it feels like maybe not a brother, but certainly a close cousin. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any plans to play the game, or are you just going to watch it online, or do you not want to come back to it?
For me to play it now more than I've
Yeah.
already played it like while developing it, um, no way. I can't do that. But I also never listen to my records once I finish them. So um, I've had my season of fun making it and being part of its development, and now it's time for the cycle to complete, the circle to complete.
I imagine you'll hear feedback from the band members anyway, because as you said, they haven't heard it, so they'll definitely tell you what they think of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 We always share everything we create. So
Brilliant.
yeah, but I
So,
definitely, I hope I made them proud for sure.
definitely. So you touched on it before about, that you wanted that you rather have had a transgender composer on this first, because of the kind of the scale of the project, and just touching on that as well. This is the first major big game developer to touch on a transgender playable character, and I know that you said that you wanted that composer to be transgender, but then you changed your mind. But looking back now, how does it feel just to be part of a project that's so monumental for LGBTQ in gaming?
Yeah, no, I feel like it's a huge honor to be a part of it. It's something I'm always going to be proud of. And to be honest, it's one of the reasons it was easy to put my heart into this, and it wasn't just a gig. It wasn't just, okay, now I got to write 3 minutes of music for this thing. And I found it easy to put my heart into it because I do think it matters. And I think it's going to matter. I think it's going to matter for a lot of people. We move incrementally through life, and we can never underestimate the power of small increments in people's lives.
Do you know when they dropped the first chapter, the music for it in the house? They shared it on social media. You have Twitter as well. Did you read through the comments that people gave hearing that music?
Yeah, it was cool. To be honest, because I wasn't really a gamer, I didn't realize how, the sort of loyal following that Dontnod has, and the kind of a really strong history of creating great games that people have really latched onto, so it was cool. The first time I realized, I realized it was when they released the first trailer, which I also scored. And that's when it was like, yeah, this is great. People are going to see this, people are going to hear this, people are going to play this, but it's one of the things though I try to guard my heart against, though, is so tempting to, like, you release something and then you just obsess about the comments and the feedback and stuff like that. And that's a new phenomena in human history. And as our ability to reach far and wide with our creations, we have to make sure that we don't let our egos get tangled up in the perceptions of that come back at us. And that should never be a litmus test for what we do as artists. I think we always need to respect the listener, but we are ultimately beholden to ourselves and to our own unique creative voices.
So this gaming project's done. Is there any desire to keep working in this industry after the first real taste of it that you've had?
Yeah, I would love to do more. I worry, though. I had a charmed experience with Dontnod, and I would be very surprised if I found another project where I had as much creative freedom and as much sort of trust. But I can hope for it, and I hope that I do find something. Not only that, but a game like this one that I feels like matters. So it matters. This game matters. So, yeah, I hope to definitely do more scoring. I feel like it's something maybe I've just scratched the surface on.
Okay, let's stick on that for a minute then. So we know it's really early days. The game isn't even out yet. But say that opportunity comes up to work on a sequel with Dontnod. I take it you would jump at that opportunity to work with them again.
Yeah, I would. Great team. I think we all trust each other's instincts. I would want to do something sonically different because I'd want to keep venturing into new territories. So I think it would have to not only be the right team, but it would also have to be the right project still. And I'm sure that they would say the same.
Right. So we're heading to the tail end of this anyway, and I've got two final questions to ask you. So say if like you're working on another gaming project and you had the opportunity to bring in another composer that you really wanted to work with, Beyond Two Souls had Lorne Belfer and Hans Zimmer do the soundtrack. Like, would there be anyone that you'd really, really wanted to collaborate with on a soundtrack?
Yeah, Jeff Barrow from Portishead. He's doing a lot of scoring now, and he's a musical hero of mine, and it would be incredible to do some sort of collaboration with him in a scoring capacity.
Okay, and we'll
a fellow Brit, right?
Exactly. I'm very happy to hear that. I'll take that all day long.
I got to bounce to another interview, so that's perfect timing.
Yeah, that's fine. So thanks guys for watching the interview. The game drops later this month. It should be around about time this interview comes out. Please like, rate, subscribe the video if you enjoyed. Thank you for being on my show, Ryan. We'll see you again soon.
You're welcome. And can I say one more thing?
Go for
it. Selfish plugs. We have just announced a new Son Lux record, which is out this Friday, so it'll actually be maybe by the time this is live, August 14th. It's the first of a 3-volume album, so it's actually like 3 albums that will be released over the course of the year, kind of like this game, which is 3 episodes released over a longer period of time. The album is called Tomorrows, so hope you enjoy.
Perfect. There's the plug.
That's it.
See you later, guys.